The night wind is rustling through the deodars. Though to be honest, I don't know what the fuck a deodar looks like. Poetic license coming from the Ruskin Bond I'm reading, that most avuncular of writers, on the simplicity and beauty of life. These pines then, below where Salome dances, and the holy men write by the light of the moon. Or maybe they're fir trees, or Christmas trees, as they call them here in India, with that wistful sentimentality that lies at the heart of the country. Lonely as a child, often solitary by choice until middle age, is how Ruskin Bond once described his life. Me too. It gives one a chance to shine sometimes, like the sheet lightning across the vast, desperate sky. My childhood was spent reading a medical dictionary. There never was very much reading material at my house, J.P. Donlevy being my father's only nod to literary prowess. Convincing myself that I had all sorts of diseases, a very muffled and muted cry for help perhaps, since I don't ever remember telling anyone of my mysterious malaises. Later I found a copy of Harold Robbins' trashy The Carpetbaggers, which fell open on the rude bits forever after. The secretly stashed jazz mags were the last discovery of my dad's home library. There was, of course, C.S. Lewis, read all too briefly to me by my largely absentee mum, Aslan being a favourite, as we were both unapologetic Leos, till I discovered he was a fucking Christian and that put me right off. She did leave a copy of The Lord of the Rings in the house, in one volume, the first book for adults I ever read. And as adults, we became thick as thieves till she passed. Give it a few years, and I was on the road to finding out who I was, using the time that college provides to make the welcome discoveries that girls like me and that I like drugs. I grew my hair, submerged myself into alternative culture and read the beats, thin as a rake and acting like one too. Whilst beat totem Jack Kerouac may have lost his mojo and died an alky living with his mum, Allen Ginsberg, that master of poetic joy, lived on, and lives on, in my heart, as does William Burroughs. That spry old junkie lived till he was 83. I too took a dip in form myself to become an alky for a decade or two, living with my dad on and off, but in the end, it was him that drank himself to death, not me. The only other writer who really cuts it for me is the eternal Charles Bukowski, that beast who sucks out the marrow with his poetic maw. Ginsberg, Burroughs and Bukowski, my holy trinity that sat together like a little shrine by my bedside, my garden of earthly delights. I'd be remiss not to mention the warm and cuddly Kurt Vonnegut and that most prescient of all authors, Philip K. Dick, both of whom have been with me for decades now too. All dead now, but the beat goes on like a river. I must break off to say the thunder is rolling across the night like a horny bear. The giant expanse of the foothills of the Himalayas is now being quenched far below. A confluence of happy tears runs down the balcony wall, the chants of the Tibetan monks rising in the valley like steam from wet clothing. The trees smell like incense. Something is burning. It must be my heart. But back to my childhood, where I would stare for hours at the weird dust conglomerations that gathered around the nodules inside the never-clean gas fires, which began to take on nightmarish proportions for me. No brothers or sisters, and a father working long shift patterns. Who says only children have too much time on their hands? Only my mum could calm my fears, and maybe I created these monsters in my mind for that reason. Except, as she was hardly ever there, like Victor Frankenstein, I was pursued across the icy wastelands of the heart by a monster of my own making for most of my adult life. Perhaps I still am, just a little. I may be my own worst enemy, but at least I've got a worthy adversary. To round off where we started, some wisdom I found through Ruskin Bond that came to him via Malcolm Muggeridge. The last true Englishmen are to be found in India. And I for one am here, typing out my life in non-conformity. And I could add as a footnote, I do know what Deodar looks like now, at least when it's cut, because my room on this rooftop in the beautiful Gowali Hills is completely made from Deodar.